When I look around this room, I can't help but wonder, is Ozempic right for me?
I will be honest with you, and I am so truthful when I say that Ozempic almost took my life.
By the way, you've been working on your body and on your health.
No, that's Ozempic.
If you have money, you can get your hands on Ozempic.
The topic Ozempic has over 300 million views.
Long, everyone's like, a smaller portion. Like, shut the f up.
Right.
You're on Ozempic.
Dolo, you look thin.
Thank you.
Ozempic?
Yep.
I'm in shape because I run, avoid sugar, and do Ozempic.
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 You've been deceived about Ozempic. Our social media feeds are full of influencers and celebrities using it as a miracle weight loss cure. But much of what those influencers are feeding us is misleading, only half true, or completely false. So you and I are going to find out exactly what social media is getting wrong about Ozempic and how dangerous it is for people taking it who shouldn't be. Perhaps you already know Ozempic's active ingredient, semaglutide. It works by mimicking a naturally occurring hormone called glucagon-like peptide 1, hence GLP-1. GLP-1 regulates blood sugar, which is great for diabetics, but it also slows down gastric emptying, leaving you feeling fuller for longer. But where did it come from? Despite sounding like something from Stranger Things, the Gila monster is actually a rather sluggish, albeit venomous lizard living in southwestern United States and northwestern parts of Mexico. A certain Dr. Ward, writing in 1899, summed it up like this: "Any man who is fool enough to get bitten by the Gila monster ought to die. The creature is so sluggish and slow of movement that the victim of its bite is compelled to help, largely in order to get bitten." However, this creature's venom has probably saved more lives than its cost because of a number of beneficial molecules it contains, including one called exendin 4. Back in the 1990s, researchers found that this molecule had basically the same action as GLP-1s, the hormone that regulates blood sugar and how full we feel. Although pharmaceutical companies took some convincing to make drugs containing a molecule derived from lizard venom, eventually the first GLP-1 mimicking drug, Byetta, was released for treating patients with type 2 diabetes. However, people taking Byetta quickly realized that they were also losing weight, and Ozempic's great-grandfather was born. Since then, a series of drugs that mimic GLP-1 have come onto the market. They include Ozempic, first approved in the US for treating type 2 diabetes in 2017. Wegovy, essentially the same drug as Ozempic but marketed towards weight loss. Both of these drugs are manufactured by the Danish pharmaceutical giant Novo Nordisk. And Mounjaro, which is used to treat type 2 diabetes, and Zepbound, the weight loss equivalent of Wegovy. Both of these drugs are manufactured by the American company Eli Lilly. All of these drugs work in the same way. They reproduce the effect of GLP-1s in the body. The only difference is the drug lasts much longer than the hormone, for days in fact, which is why you only need to take them once per week. But at the same time as these drugs have come onto the market, something else has happened: the rise of social media. On apps like Instagram and TikTok, more and more influencers have glorified these drugs as a tool to lose weight despite not having type 2 diabetes, being overweight, or having any metabolic disease.
It's a miracle. It's too good to be true.
I want to be the incredibly shrinking. Look how skinny she is.
Oh, is hormone spelled Ozempic?
And many of their followers have copied them. Now, people have always wanted to be like their idols, even when what those celebrities do is simply unattainable for normal people. Like Kim Kardashian, for example, losing 16 pounds or the equivalent of these 2 bags of potatoes, carrots, or whatever you have access to in just 3 weeks just to fit into Marilyn Monroe's famous dress for a few minutes. The situation gets more complicated when we have influencers and journalists being treated as experts instead of doctors, and celebrities declaring Ozempic is for heavy people.
I didn't want to use it because it's silly. Like it's for heavy people.
As though being heavy is any kind of criteria for medical treatment. This is nothing new. All through the 20th century, women in particular have been bombarded with weight loss products, advice, or just generally been hectored about losing weight. Even back in the 15th century, Dante reserved the third circle of hell as punishment for the sin of gluttony. Sinners guilty of overindulgence were forced to lie down in the mud and endure the freezing rain, all while being watched over by the 3-headed dog Cerberus. Ozempic influencers will have their own special place in hell reserved for them for convincing ordinary people to take drugs to lose weight. Because as we're about to see, the consequences of that decision for some people have been fatal. Stomach cramps, diarrhea, and abdominal pain are not just the typical results of a dodgy kebab or the unavoidable results of an ill-advised Friday night out. They're also commonly experienced side effects of taking Ozempic. Indeed, Stephen Fry said he was vomiting 5 times per day while on the drug, forcing him to stop taking it. While these side effects may be merely unpleasant, Ozempic has already been implicated in something far more serious.
She had a little bit of brown stuff coming out of her mouth, and I realised she wasn't breathing. And I started doing CPR. It was just pouring out, and I turned her to the side and trying to get it out, because she couldn't breathe.
Trish Webster, a 53-year-old Australian woman, died from acute gastrointestinal illness after taking Ozempic to lose weight for her daughter's wedding. And turning to mental health, here's one influencer talking about her experience of taking just 0.75 milligrams of Ozempic, less than a third of the standard dose.
Where I would hyperventilate, shake on the ground, throw up, cry in the shower, but have a rational thought knowing that this isn't me and this isn't what I could feel like. And usually I could pull myself out of this feeling or out of this situation, but I couldn't, and that's what scared me.
Now, admittedly, these are extreme examples. I include them here simply to make the point, like all drugs, Ozempic has side effects, ranging from the unpleasant to the potentially lethal. More than 40% of American adults are obese or overweight. With massive demand and prices in the US exceeding $1,000 per month, it's no surprise that black markets dealing in these drugs have sprung up. All it takes is a couple of clicks and you can have, well, something delivered to your door. But would you know which of these Ozempic pens is the real one? It's this one. The consequences of injecting yourself with something that is not Ozempic could be devastating.
Confused. It's like I didn't know what I was doing. And within another couple of minutes, I'd lost consciousness. It wasn't, my daughter got it and gave it to Vicky, and Vicky gave it to the paramedics, and they were able to pull the label off, and that's when they realised it was an insulin pen.
It's so dangerous for a non-diabetic to inject insulin, this woman is lucky she didn't die. Yet here's what happened when 12 different products, all bought online, all supposedly containing semaglutide, were tested for their contents.
Some of them, so we go from some samples that are 91% pure, some that are 33% pure, all the way down to 6% pure, and one that had no semaglutide in at all, so that's completely impure.
If you're using any weight loss drug that you've acquired from anywhere other than by prescription from an in-person doctor, please don't. You simply can't know what you're taking and you may be putting yourself at risk of great harm. That said, the massive demand for Ozempic is not coming entirely from the public. From direct-to-consumer advertising on the New York subway to handing out some pretty juicy kickbacks to cooperative doctors.
And we can't give them this fabulous, robust medication.
She sounds really objective, doesn't she? Big Pharma is driving demand for its own product by pushing doctors to prescribe and consumers to request semaglutide. Who can blame anyone desperate to lose weight for requesting this drug in face of such massive pressures from its own manufacturer? Once upon a time, if you wanted to lose weight, you were told to eat sensibly and increase your levels of physical activity. Since then, we've learned weight loss is much more nuanced than that. But then semaglutide came along, clinical trials began in which participants were able to lose weight by just getting 1 jab per week. As long as they ate 500 less calories per day, did more than 3 hours of exercise per week, and had regular meetings with a dietitian, which, by the way, I'll tell you exactly how much these people lost in a minute. But my point here is that Ozempic doesn't simply work if you don't eat less, which Ozempic usually facilitates, or do more exercise. There are no magic bullets in medicine, and this is no different. But glamorizing Ozempic isn't the only thing influencers are guilty of. In recent years, another disturbing trend has developed. Ozempic shaming is the rather unpleasant practice of some social media commentators calling out celebrities or people they think have been using Ozempic, as though that was something to be ashamed of. But to call Ozempic cheating is to seriously misunderstand what's involved in using the drug to lose weight. Remember the study I mentioned just a minute ago, where the participants who'd received semaglutide lost, on average, 16% of their body weight, compared to just 6% for others. That's a seriously impressive result for Ozempic. But remember, everything else they had to do: eat less, exercise more, and have counseling sessions with a dietitian to change their lifestyle habits. Week after week after week. There's simply no way you can take Ozempic and lose weight for the long term without making any change to your lifestyle whatsoever. That would be like putting a plaster on a broken leg. You ain't going nowhere. This explains why taking Ozempic for the short term or casual weight loss is counterproductive, and that lifestyle adjustment has to be for the long term. In a different study that compared semaglutide injections to a placebo, sure enough, the participants taking semaglutide, along with a reduced diet and more exercise, saw on average weight loss of 17%. and then regained an average of 2/3 of the weight they had lost once they stopped taking the drug. This study backs up many people's experience that as soon as they stopped taking injections, they put the weight back on. As far as anyone knows at the minute, Ozempic is for life, not just for Instagram. But why is it so hard to lose weight and keep it off for the long term? Take any major news event, international conflict, pandemics, a shock election result, and ask 100 people what caused it to happen. You'll get 100 different answers, and they might all be right. Obesity is the same. Now, before I go any further, I'd just like to say I'm about to go into a discussion of the factors that affect obesity, and if that might be triggering to you in any way, please feel free to skip ahead to the next chapter. The timestamps are below. There are a multitude of reasons why someone might become obese, but before we go into them, there's one particularly common myth we need to bust. Being overweight and obesity are not questions of willpower, and it's not a moral failure. Obesity is a complex illness that has been investigated for decades, and the one thing we can be sure of is that the people do not become overweight or obese simply because they are greedy, lack willpower, or any other lazy stereotype the media comes up with. So what's going on? For the last 300,000 years or so, our ancestors were locked into a constant struggle to find enough food. Whether they were hunting or gathering, they constantly faced the threats of famine, scarcity, or their dinner potentially biting their head off. In fact, we only need to go back a few generations to realize our grandparents and our great-grandparents lived very different lives from our own. They were more likely to do manual jobs than we are today, and they simply had access to less food than we do today. Since then, food has become first abundant and then ubiquitous in society. The prevalence of high-calorie, ultra-processed, and food delivery apps only make the problem of overconsumption even worse. At the same time as all of that, we've become more sedentary as we've moved from manual jobs to work in offices. Taken together, all of these factors result in what is known as the obesogenic environment, a society that is literally encouraging us to become fat and less active. We live in a topsy-turvy world where we're surrounded by high-calorie, low-nutrient foods which we know can make us overweight. We're fed a diet culture that serves us impossible ideals for the average person to achieve, and normal body weights are stigmatized as being heavy.
Friends with Ozempic, because I realized I didn't want to use it because it's silly, like it's, you know, for heavy people.
And the doctors who treat us in their surgeries and advise us on TV get paid kickbacks by the very drug companies whose product it is that they're prescribing. With all these cards stacked against us, it's no wonder many people put on weight. Third, we're starting to understand that some people may have a genetic predisposition towards being overweight. For example, a mutation in the FTO gene appears to be linked to an increased level of the hormone called ghrelin, commonly known as the hunger hormone, for its role in motivating us to eat. We also know not all types of hunger are made equal. Dr. Andres Acosta, a world-leading expert on obesity and weight loss, has identified 4 different types of hunger, all identifiable by genetic markers that may cause individuals to overconsume. For each of these types of hunger, Dr. Acosta prescribes a different course of treatment. Notice how all these drugs that are prescribed are always done so in conjunction with a diet or another type of treatment, and only one of these types of hunger is treated with GLP-1s. So yes, Ozempic is a suitable treatment for weight loss for certain individuals who meet certain criteria. But that depends on their medical history, their lifestyle, whether they've tried any other treatments, and whether they've failed. In other words, it's a decision for a doctor to make in a consultation with a patient. The good news is that when Ozempic is taken by the people who really need it, it's even better than you realize.
And if your genetic test positive, you lose 19.5% of total body weight loss at 52 weeks or 1 year, versus if you're genetically negative, you only lose 10%.
That's right. When Ozempic was prescribed to people whose symptoms required it, they lost nearly double the amount of weight than people who just took Ozempic and hoped for the best. So clearly these drugs do have a role to play in the treatment of certain people with obesity. Other determinants of obesity include socioeconomic factors such as not knowing how to cook or a lack of money to buy nutritious foods, the prevalence of mood disorders. The last thing you want to think about is when you're trying to improve your diet is when you're suffering in other parts of your life. A chronic lack of sleep. Insufficient sleep can negatively affect how you metabolize food and lead you to choose higher calorie foods, in addition to affecting your hunger hormones and cravings. And genetics. Genetic mutations such as the FTO gene mutation mentioned a minute ago can affect our hunger levels through dysregulated hormone levels, and they can alter metabolic pathways and can make us more or less likely to store excess calories as fat. We've come to realize in recent years that there's no such disease as cancer. Rather, there are hundreds of different types of cancer that all have different causes and require different treatments. Obesity is exactly the same. No single drug can treat all causes of obesity, just like no single intervention can treat all causes of cancer. At the same time, we're starting to discover that drugs like Ozempic may have wider ranging benefits than managing just type 2 diabetes and weight loss. At the time of recording, studies have just been published showing Ozempic could have a role to play in treating a host of other chronic illnesses, including cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, and even PCOS. It may well be the case that the raft of weight loss drugs that we've seen over the last couple of years are just the tip of the iceberg. New drugs are currently in development. For example, retatrutide, which produces the same effect as 3 different receptors, all affecting blood sugar levels. One study showed participants who took the highest dose of this drug lost on average 24% of their body weight after 48 weeks. This is mind-blowing. It's almost as effective as bariatric surgery, which is widely regarded as being the gold standard of weight loss treatment. This drug will need to undergo more testing before it's approved for use with patients, but if and when that does happen, expect the whole social media circus to begin again. The worst case scenario would be that these drugs become more in demand as the number of obese people rises, more expensive, and only the most rich can access them. As a result, I would like to present my brand new, totally effective, and above all free magic solution for being healthier created by Dr. Karan. It's called walking. It's very underrated. Just place one foot after the other and repeat a lot. Do this for 10 minutes per day and I guarantee you'll increase your daily step count. You may also find more energy, improved digestion, a better mood, less brain fog, a chance to think clearly or experience nature. Terms and conditions apply. It may help you lose weight if that is something you want, but also remember your value isn't determined by a scale alone. That's walking, only available to the majority of humans in the world for free right now. Side effects may include joy, increased stamina, greater bone density. Always consult with a medical professional before commencing all courses of treatment. In all seriousness, while we're talking about walking, don't fall for the rhetoric about 10,000 steps per day. Studies have shown increasing your daily step count by just 2,000 steps results in 10% reduction in your risk of suffering a cardiovascular event. That's just 2,000 steps from whatever your daily step count is today. If you can do that, you'll already be making a significant improvement to your health. Here's 4 other things that everyone can do to improve their health. Whether you plan to get more sleep, do more steps, or eat more vegetables, the result is always that you'll gain something. More energy, stronger muscles, a healthier gut. The list is almost endless. You can't lose weight endlessly, but you can gain so much to improve your quality of life. Focus on what you can gain, not lose. To return to the walking example, you already know how to do it and don't need any equipment. It's easy to get going and easy to scale up. If you increase your step count by 500 steps per day, you'll hit the 2,000 step goal in less than a week. So start small and choose something scalable. It is important to improve both your diet and do more exercise, but it's not always easy to do both at the same time. Trying to do too much at once can sometimes be counterproductive. So why not alternate between improving your diet one week and doing more exercise the next? Some foods are naturally just more satiating than others. Protein found in meat, eggs, nuts, pulses is filling because it stimulates, guess what? GLP-1 receptors, just like Ozempic, while foods rich in fiber, like whole grains, fruit, or vegetables, require a ton of chewing, which releases gastric juices, which expand the stomach and make you feel fuller. So if you're still struggling to stay full, eat more protein and more fiber. Now, if you can do just 1 or 2 of these things, that'll be great. But frankly, it won't be enough, and that's not your fault. It's going to take something a whole lot more powerful to bring the obesogenic environment under control. The good news is we've already done something similar once before. One of the greatest public health triumphs in many countries in the past 50 years has been the decline of smoking. How have millions of people been able to break free of such a pernicious addiction? Only by a long-term, multi-pronged assault on cigarettes and the tobacco industry that has included public health campaigns, huge amount of scientific research, legislation around advertising and packaging of cigarettes, anti-smoking messages in schools, a ban on smoking in public places, the development of pharmacological, cognitive, and behavioral treatments for nicotine addiction. The list goes on. Nothing less than this may be required to defeat the obesity epidemic, and one example of this comes from the UK's sugar tax. Introduced in 2018, the tax on all soft drinks containing more than 5 grams of sugar per 100 mils seems to have worked. One study concluded the tax had a measurable impact impact on obesity in primary school-aged girls, reducing obesity by 9% in some areas where children are known to consume the largest amount of sugary drinks. However, in other parts of the world, they've gone even further. Since 2016, all soft drinks in Chile have had front-of-label nutrition facts printed on them, warning consumers they have an excess of particular nutrients, e.g. sugar. A 2021 study found that this resulted in a 27% reduction in sugar consumption from foods labeled as high in sugar in just 1 year. More than that, the same law in Chile prohibited unhealthy foods from being made available in schools, prevented the use of cartoon characters in advertising, high in any products like cereal. Sorry, Tony, it's time to go. And prevented any product carrying these labels from being advertised on TV when children were more likely to be watching. This kind of legislation is just one tool that will have to be used over many years to overcome the problem and tackle the obesity problem. Yes, there is a place for drugs like Ozempic, but as we've seen, they will not work for everyone and they aren't for everyone. If we are to effectively tackle the obesity epidemic, it will be thanks to a wide range of drugs, treatments, therapies, a management that is holistic and tailored for the individual, and one which encompasses lifestyle adjustments, not just semaglutide. And now you know the full story about Ozempic. If you'd like to know the truth about vaping and why those claims that it's 95% safer than smoking are not all they seem, then you can watch this video now.